Today, I'd like to talk about AWS Lambda URL. Everyone already knows what AWS Lambda is. And you ask someone who is from AWS community or at least knows what serverless is, they probably will know what AWS Lambda because this is very popular service and it's usually common among developers to use it. And honestly, this is the great choice. It has a lot of practical use cases how we can use this, but the most practical use case that we usually see is the combination of AWS Lambda and the API Gateway. So especially when it is about serverless applications. So when you're building some kind of a backend, you probably will have AWS API Gateway and AWS Lambda that is playing the role of the handler of your request. But this kind of setup sometimes a bit cumbersome because you have to know how to do it. You either have to use some kind of frameworks that will help you set up API Gateway and Lambda frameworks like serverless.com or at least AWS SAM. Otherwise, you're gonna be bumped into situation where you will have to create pretty complex for straightforward task cloud formation template, defining your Lambda functions and all the required API gateway resources that should make these things work, like resource, method, mapping, and all those stuff. So, other any other options, and definitely they are. Lambda functions has the URL. The URL is a very simple thing. It's just a property of Lambda function and it is super cool. It is cool because it's easy to set up. It is cool because it does not bring you a limitation that API Gateway gives. Lambda by default has the timeout of 3 seconds, but it can be reached up to 15 minutes. Everyone knows that. And as well as everyone knows that API Gateway has its own limits, which is 30 seconds. Yes, I know that in last year AWS introduced the ability to increase this timeout up to 1 minute, but it is still 1 minute. It's not 15 minutes that you have in AWS Lambda. So what options do you have if you want to do some long requests? Okay, you can't use API Gateway, and then you start to figure out what to do. You either create some kind of a async architecture, which is makes sense, or you just go and use AWS Lambda that has the same timeout as AWS Lambda because this is AWS Lambda. It is the property of AWS Lambda. So why no one use it? I don't know. It is pretty cool feature. It has its own limits, and we should name them. One of them is the lack of functionality because API Gateway brings you a lot of features like authorizers, mapping, caching, throttling, API keys, and many different things. So Lambda URL does not. It just brings you the URL that you can send your data to and invoke Lambda function. It has its own limits. So if you don't need complex queries, if you are not care about authorizations, if you want to bring something live very easy, that's the thing to go. So again, try to explore that. Just keep in mind that AWS Lambda URL by default has no authorization, but it can also be with AI-based authorization, which is basically a key and secret signature that you bring together with your payload. But honestly, for things like simple invocations or situations where you have to send something to the server and then you have to wait for response for few minutes or maybe 5 minutes, you can and you have to use Lambda URLs. For things like webhooks that usually don't have authorizations, the webhooks are public by default, and usually the whole logic check is happening inside the webhook is easy. Or again, for something that has to be really public, just go and try to use Lambda URL. So that's my tip for today. Check it out. I think you will Love it. Cheers. Bye.